welcome back from lunch. Thank you, Ivy, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Terrifically excited for this session. Talent and the talent pipeline is such a perennial discussion for insurers, figuring out how to get more attention and attract more, especially young talent, into the sector. Would you tell us a little bit about what you do at CareerVines and how you think strategically about that question?
So I was in the industry, so I am a beneficiary of the insurance industry. My career spanned 20 years, worked at ACE and then subsequently Chubb. And in that duration, I did focus on talent management as really the specialty of my career, but did take a stint on the A&H side of the business. So I was a business development manager for the A&H business. And then topped off my career as the Chief Culture Officer for Chubb, really curating the integration between ACE and Chubb, a job of a lifetime, certainly. And my practice is really focused on supporting high-performing talent, so I really work with executives, but also individuals really trying to really promote their own careers and grow within this industry. So I would say that to me, talent management has always been probably the most strategic anchor of the people side of the business, because invariably what you do to attract talent into an organization, what you do to grow that talent, and then what you do to retain that talent, I think is on the minds of any leader of any organization. But if you look at everybody in this room, everybody still has to manage their careers. So it doesn't matter which company you work for, if it's a big carrier or reinsurance company, or if it's a small startup. I think invariably people want to know, will I have the opportunities that I'm ready for? Can I grow and get the opportunities that promote my own career? And invariably, can I work around colleagues that give me sort of the sharpening that I want in my own career? So I think it affects organizations in a macro level, but I think individually we all obviously have to manage our careers.
How can the insurance industry as a whole improve its reputation and brand? I mean, just thinking back to our London conference, I think last year, David Howden, who we had on stage with us, called the insurance industry the ugly sister of banking and FinServ. Not the most politically correct phrase, but I think there's a feeling that the industry could do more to improve its reputation, its competitiveness when it comes to attracting especially young recruits, and that's something you think about every day.
Did you just call us the ugly sister? Like literally.
I certainly didn't.
To our face. Okay, so I suppose I would think about this question in two ways. Like, so if you were to do a focus group with people who are in the industry, like people in this room, I think you would find most of us are bullish about this industry. We think it's a compelling place to work because we serve a very needed purpose for individuals, communities, and businesses, and economies. And I think also you would find that the complexity of what we do gives you a range of careers, right? But if you took a focus group of lay people who do not work in the industry, so if you went actually and asked the rest of your family members, what do you think about the industry? I think most people's experience of the industry is probably claims that wasn't paid. So most people will give you a very long story like, hey, I called the guy at Geico or I called the guy at BF&M and apparently they're not going to pay this claim. So I think the lay person seems to have more of a negative experience, and usually people with negative experiences expound on why they hate these negative experiences. So I do think there's a reputation issue around that. But I would counter the perception as somebody who has been on the inside of the insurance, right? So yes, there's a brand and reputation issue, but my case is, I think, nothing really happens in the world unless there's a layer of insurance. So I think the purpose and meaning of insurance can be underscored. I do also think the complexity of our business is so compelling. So when I used to speak to university students, I would play a game, tell me what you're studying, and I'll tell you what business you can write working with us. And invariably, anything that you're studying has a correlation to something that we do in the P&C business. And then the other thing that I think younger generations care about more is, I suppose, the meaning and the purpose. I struggle with this one because I think if you listen to earnings calls, most of the earnings calls in our business are really about the commercial nature of the risks that we're writing and the results of that risk. Rarely will we just sit there telling you, okay, these are the claims these are the claims we've paid out, and this is how meaningful, this is the meaningful work that we're doing on the ground. So I think we have a job to do to connect the meaning of what we do, the purpose of what we do, to this generation that's really craving a place they can land. Insurance invariably is about creating resilience in communities. And so my hope is, as a business, we can kind of make people connect resilience and innovation to the reputation of our industry.
Yeah, I hear that all the time, that young people care hugely about meaning and feeling that their work has a lot of meaning. I know you work a lot on workplace culture, and then what's been called DEI. I think you're thinking about sort of how DEI evolves in following the backlash that we've seen, particularly in the US, to those issues and the kind of political controversies over DEI. But yeah, how do you today navigate DEI and creating more inclusive workplace culture?
Yeah, I sit differently with this question about DEI because I think what you have right now are very loud objections to DEI. But honestly, Lee, that has always been the case in my experience. I think the only difference is that people feel more emboldened to say what they want to say, or they say to criticize the work. And I think you can think of the work going through maybe a soft and hard market. Like sometimes we really just don't think we should be focused on D&I work. And then sometimes it's like, oh my God, we better do everything that's related to D&I. So I think there's always this swing of support to this swing of overcorrecting back out of it. As a practitioner, I can tell you that any leader that cares about the performance of their business cares about diversity. I think it's more attractive, obviously, to listen to the loudest criticisms, but most leaders want to attract an organization that has a varied level of skill, varied levels of experiences, varied levels of backgrounds, because ultimately you're trading in a market that's diverse. So it doesn't stand to logic. Now, the biggest criticisms are there, and I think I cannot object to people having a rigorous and meaningful discussion. So they are people who think it's reverse discrimination if you focus on women versus focusing on men, or if you focus on black people versus focusing on white people. And I think one of the things I would advocate for is the work has always been talent management work. So if you're doing talent management, you're really focused on understanding the metrics of what's governing the movement of talent management in your organization. I think the performative nature of D&I stands to be criticized, because if you're just blasting your website with a focus on the issues that you think are paramount, I think what you've seen is people now going back to their websites, cleaning out their websites, because the work to me, honestly, fundamentally is talent management. So it's really looking at who's growing, who's getting promotions, is that valid? Can we say that our leadership team is a reflection of the people that are working in our organization? Can we say that people have a fair play in this culture? Can we say that your background has no meaning to your ability to rise in this organization? To me, those are issues that are legitimately current issues and will always be issues that sit with organizations. Now, I think one of the things I want to point out, really, and I think this has been a weakness in D&I, I think D&I work often was very fragile. Like every time you criticized people, people would be like, oh my God, you can't say that. Yeah. Yes, we can criticize D&I work if it's not working. And so I would hope, rather than a resetting of the meaning of what it means to be truly inclusive and diverse, it really is about allowing the work to mature. Mm-hmm. Like, let's actually have the debate. Let's really have the argument about things that maybe hold people back from being supportive. Yep. So I would like to think it's this second reiteration. But I fundamentally disagree with the fact that the feeling wasn't always warm as somebody who did that work. I mean, it wasn't people were knocking down my door to do D&I work. That just never happened.
Yeah.
But now I think it's emboldened, it's in the media, everybody's talking about it, but the work has always been very difficult, actually.
Yeah. And obviously there are pockets where D&I work, or whatever you want to call it, talent management work, has made huge progress. It's still striking to go, and I think this is less true in this market, but to go in London where I'm based and walk around Leadenhall Market at 5 p.m. I mean, you do sort of notice the lack of diversity in the industry. What are the big bottlenecks there? I mean, what kinds of what do you run up against in trying to do more diverse talent management?
I thank you for that question. So I think it varies by marketplace, right? Let me start with Bermuda, because I think we have this room looks like what truly is in the insurance market, right? But if this was a meeting for only leaders in insurance, this room would only be white men with a scattering of white women, like maybe 5% or 4% or whatever that is, and then maybe 1 or 2 brown or black people, right? But this is who's working in the industry, because this is a very diverse room. So congratulations to PwC for pulling this level of diversity. Look, I think the issues are still unfortunately consistent. It's a thinning pyramid to the top, and there's a level of complexity about that. I think in Bermuda, in my experience, because I lived and worked in Bermuda for 13 years, the insurance industry is very attractive to a lot of people in this industry. I do think that the Bermudian experience is kind of getting to the middle of the organization and having much more difficulty breaking up into the top. So I would be, and by the way, stop me after the conference and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you could probably count the number of Bermudians who are actually at the top echelon of the industry. I think there are issues of social exclusion. So if the leaders are of one ilk, they tend to socialize with each other. That's the circle. How do you break into that circle if you're out of the circle? Issues of gender are still consistently the same. The predominant weight of managing a family, and if you have elderly parents, even though there are men who are highly participatory in family issues, a lot of that weight still falls on women. So if you're a woman and you're trying to get ahead in your career, and you kind of have these little ones you're always rushing to, and then it's a drawdown on your energy. Certainly it's a drawdown on your level of ambition and how hard you can grow. So I think those issues are still consistent. But when you look at gender statistics, there is actually a glass ceiling at the first supervisory level. So McKinsey has some of the best longitudinal studies. They did a 10-year study. The first line management role is where women start losing the gap. So most people think it's at the top, but the gap starts much earlier. So a key takeaway for those of you who are managers, every time you're doing those first level supervisory promotions, is really look at your gender equity, because when the gap begins, it actually simply widens. Not only does it widen in role, it widens in salary. I think women at the top are often the social isolation. You're always one of only, so feeling like you have to fit in. But I don't think that's any different from being like a black Bermudian in a very white industry. Like you're always kind of a little bit on the margins, trying to make sure like you're feeling part of it. And the reason I'm saying these things very kind of bluntly is I lived here. I think Bermuda is a great experiment of how it actually can work. But I think Bermuda has the highest chance of actually showing us that it can work, because the mix of talent is here. But I think there's a need to pull that talent into leadership ranks. It's not for a lack of its availability, because if you work with Bermudians, I think the talent is there. It really is who is going to get that big opportunity.
That's such an interesting, good point about kind of informal social networks, that it's not just about, there may not be formal discrimination in a workplace, but if the people who are socializing and chummy after work look one way and behave one way, it's hard to break into that.
That's right.
In a second, I want to open it up to questions and ask the audience to be a little bit bolder in your questioning, please, after a quiet morning. But before we go there, just I want to ask you about AI, which has come up repeatedly this morning. There are a million AI conversations to be had. One is just like, to the extent it is making every underwriter and every insurance employee more efficient, that's great. But I wonder if it ends up replacing some of the junior roles that people come into the industry doing. Like if AI is helping underwriters, replace junior talent basically, then does that kind of squeeze the pipeline of opportunities to come into the industry, and how do you adapt to that?
Yeah, I was talking to Jasmine De Silva. I don't think Jasmine is in the room, but one of the things she was talking about is how much she envied the experience of kind of early career talent, because she was, Jasmine is youngish. I don't know how old Jasmine is. I won't out her age. But Jasmine was saying when she was a young underwriter, she kind of had to stand at the copying machine doing faxing and doing photocopies. Who wants to do that, right? Yes, they are jobs that are more at the entry level, but many of us remember being that intern or that junior person where you're doing a lot of this kind of paper pushing, paper heavy work that's actually not adding that much value. So I'm really, I'm probably on the counter side of that. I think the industry deserves to have kind of a push around where does the value in the skill derive for a younger underwriter. And I think some of the pushback is the maturation of underwriting may be much faster if you remove the more menial work. And so I think there's a sentiment, and you sometimes hear this in kind of sidebars, is like, wow, I can't believe that guy is already an AVP, it just took him 4 years, and it took me 15 years to be an AVP. So there's almost the envy, I put in my time, you haven't put in your time, Lee, and you're Johnny come lately, and you're now getting the VP role. But I think that's such a mindset shift that we need to make in our industry. Yes, there's a maturation journey for being a really great underwriter or a really great claims person. I would argue you probably have to see soft cycles and hard cycles to really be good at the craft. But if we are laden with kind of menial tasks that are really not adding value, why would we envy younger underwriters who are getting faster to more robust work in our business and actually are impacting the business? These days you can actually, especially if you're hiring very well, you can bring in younger talent that impacts your business in a much shorter space of time than 10 to 20 years ago. So I think to me it's something to embrace and something to be open to, rather than something to fear.
Great. Right up front. You can just, there's a mic.
Good afternoon. Great conversation. Thank you for bringing this into this discussion today. It's such an important suite of topics. You've already touched upon it a bit, including with that last Q&A, but I'd love to invite you to chat a little bit more about this dynamic. In Bermuda, this is the one place in the world where young people know that actuaries and cat modelers are rock stars. But outside of Bermuda, no one knows what reinsurance is. And worldwide, people have heard of insurance, the business that we all love, but they think it's boring, drab, etc. Collectively, what more can we do to excite, inspire young talent, knowing that human capital is the most important capital, to want to be in our business and bring their perspectives and their talent to us?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and I think I will just draw from my own experience. I think when we're hiring into the business, we tend to make the whole study of the industry very academic. So we're kind of sitting down with an underwriter or a claims person, and we're sort of saying okay, this is the product line, maybe pass your certifications. So I think the tendency is to make it very academic. So let me give you a quick story of how I entered the industry, because I was your typical, very unaware of insurance and its complexity. I want to give a lot of kudos to Roger Gillett, who was I think the chairman or the president of Bermuda, ACE Bermuda at the time. But he talked to me about, why are you interested in this business? And I was being very honest. I say, Roger, I'm just making a good salary, and thank you very much. And he was like, okay, so what's your background? I told him I studied international development, and I was really interested probably in entering the UN or the IMF at some point in my career. And he actually offered me access to him. He said, if you just come to me every Friday, bring a newspaper, and I will try to show you your interest in the world and how that maps to insurance. And so he would say to me, just choose any headline in the newspaper, and let's think about the insurance that's behind the headline. I have to tell you, that experience to this day sticks with me. So every time I read the news, I'm always thinking about who is carrying the exposure. But I don't think that this is how we tend to teach insurance. The other quick story I will give you is when I was Chief Culture Officer at Chubb, I went to the risk engineer satellite office for the company. And I would say looking at risk engineering is also probably one of the best educations you will have about the business. The complexity of what these engineers are doing to understand the risks for big factories, for airplanes, for kind of introducing like, drone technologies. I mean, I was sitting it's a huge facility. I was thinking like, why aren't all the underwriting trainees coming through this? Because I think when you have a tangible way of learning about the business, I think it just sort of excites the mind a little bit differently. But nothing is going to beat being a good manager. I have to tell you sincerely, in any discipline, the relationship you have with your line manager, the interest of your line manager, the support you get from your line manager is so critical to your growth and development. So regardless of any of the fancy changes people can make to their development programs, I think the first line of defense is the quality of your managers in growing and developing and mentoring talent. Thank you for the question. Anything else?
That was a good question, tough one to follow. One back there.
Hi, Ivy.
Hi.
Nice to see you. Welcome. And,
Thank
good
you.
to see your success. Congratulations. Is there a mic? I'll just speak loud. To the question, earlier in your remarks, you mentioned companies were cleaning up their websites. I'm curious. Thanks, Nick. Now I don't have to shout. What sort of words and language are they using in changing their websites? What are you seeing as popular? The next question is it working? Is it achieving the same aims and objectives of the original diversity, equity, inclusion language? Is it making a difference? Or is it being swept under the carpet and disappearing?
You know, honestly, first of all, I can't speak to it from like a very informed basis because I'm probably just like any of you where I'm following some of those stories on the news. But I think the biggest concern has been there have been some, in the US in particular, there have been these activists that are going after companies. So they'll go on your website, they'll sort of try to kind of understand what you're doing, and if they don't approve of what you're doing, they'll sort of say, hey, these people are very woke, and they're supporting the following issues. So I think that those activists have been making a lot of companies sort of feel very conscious of what's on my website. Let me figure out a way to reposition what I'm saying on the website. So I think you sort of see some people maybe adjusting language, but also frankly removing like some statistics, like they may have put some statistics up there, and making it maybe more general rather than more specific. Now, my issue with that is if you have to change your website, you probably need to have a very hard conversation inside your company as to what are we doing? And can we say hand on heart that we have a steady position and a value system that should be stable? So I was fortunately, I had already left the workplace by the time all this stuff came up. So I wasn't in the trenches on it. But I think my point being is may your values stay constant. That's my point. So if you feel like you have to change something and suddenly you're like, maybe we shouldn't have said that, then that was performative work. It really wasn't truly reflective of where you stood. And so there are some CEOs, I think Marriott came out and said something, JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon said something, but the common thread of what these CEO said, like, the business that we are requires and will be diverse, and there is constancy in our commitment to that. The variation by which companies are moving around these issues, I think, is varied, but I think my own perspective is performative work has always been an issue in the practice. So there are a lot of companies that are saying that they're doing things, but actually maybe we're not doing the things that they are saying, and so they don't want to stand by it publicly because it doesn't really reflect truly who they are. But may your values be constant. I think as a business, that's what you really want. What do we really stand for, and our values constant, regardless of where the political winds shift? Thank you for the question.
We have another question up here towards the front.
Good afternoon. I love the experiences you shared during the session today, and I would love to hear from you in terms of gender equality. What were the true changes that you've seen in practice over the time you've been in the industry, and what do you think will be the next big change required to bring this to the next level?
Yeah, I still don't think I'm old enough to have seen sufficient shifting around gender equality, right? Like, so my experience entering the industry, I thought there wasn't as many women in leadership ranks, and by the time I left the industry, that was still the case. Now, I do think more women have opted in, mid-level management. I think that's more even, depending on the company, depending on the country. I think in the senior ranks, I still see it's just a smaller percentage of women in those ranks. But I think what has changed over the course of my career, and certainly this is how I coach women in particular, I think women are often encouraged to think about what they lack versus what they already bring. So every time, women are, when I'm coaching a woman, she's often thinking like, I can't apply for that job because I don't have this, Most men don't really think about their deficits as much as women think about their deficits. Most men are like, hey, I'm great, Ivy, I really think I should be up for that opportunity. And generally speaking, most guys are great, but not all of them, obviously, right? Whereas I think most women will give you a list of all their deficits. And so from a coaching perspective, I think getting women to really see themselves as enough, frankly. And even if you don't have the 10 things, you don't want a job where you can already do the 10 things, right? And I think it's often weird, like you wait until you have, the 20 things before you apply. So I love to see women be more bold, to say, you know what, I have only 6 of the things you needed, but hey, I'm here, please consider me. The other thing is I feel like don't let your family situation lead the conversation. So yes, we are all having different family situations, but I think some of the coaching I would give is if you put that in the conversation when you're still negotiating for the job, it starts shaping the conversation. Get the job and then tell them you have the family. Like, that's what I do. Get the job, get the commitment, get the salary, and say, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, I have these 3 children. I hope that's not an issue. I hope that's not an issue because I'm taking care of my mom and I'm going to have to be out of the office on this afternoon, right? So don't let that become part of the negotiation. I think that's crazy. Don't be shy about negotiating for more money, right? And I think when it comes to coaching women around there, I think part of what I will say is have a number in your head. And actually, this is gender neutral. Many people will say, I want more money. Most people don't. When I say how much more, most people don't know what they want, really, exactly. And so if you're not clear about the negotiation you want, it's easy for you to still be compensated at the rate that the company will give you. Keep in mind that you're competing within your own company, but I think better career management is making sure your skill set is aligned with the rest of the industry. So how good am I within Renaissance Re or Partner Re, but also retaining, like how good am I in insurance? Like if I were to look at the London market, can I still swim in those waters? The danger you have in Bermuda sometimes is being too insular. You're looking inward, and you could be a big fish in Bermuda. That doesn't make you a big fish in the industry. So keep that in mind. But and again, for women in particular, I think I would also say get a sponsor earlier. So a sponsor is somebody who has power and influence. A mentor is just somebody who's going to help you with career management. Having somebody in your corner who has power and influence is critical for anybody. So nobody got to any big level position without having somebody who was powerful and critical in their career. So get a sponsor, don't wait for sponsorship programs, try to have at least one person who has power and influence in our industry. And in Bermuda, you're lucky because there's a higher percentage of very powerful insurance executives that have a presence in Bermuda than somebody like me sitting in the US. So you have a higher probability of getting a sponsor if you have the boldness to just go and introduce yourself. Those would be my tips.
Thank you so much. That was genuinely captivating. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, Agni.
Thank you so much.